speaking with Meto about this idea probably a couple of years ago about putting together a panel on judicial reform, because as you all know, and as I think was mentioned this morning, reform of the legal system and the judicial system it has been identified as a key component to Macedonia's entry into the EU and other transnational organizations, and it really has become one of those items that it has been constantly flagged as an area that needs improvement. And we have been able to put together for you an outstanding panel for you here today to discuss some of these issues. Seated here immediately to my right is the Honorable Richard Stearns. Judge Stearns is a U.S. District Court judge in Boston. He graduated from Harvard Law School in 1976. He was a Rhodes Scholar graduate from Oxford University in 1971. He had a distinguished career prior to joining the bench, and in 1994, joined the bench. He was nominated by President Clinton to be a U.S. District Court judge in Boston, where he has served since that time. In addition to his busy court docket in Boston, Judge Stearns has served in various capacities as an advisor and lecturer. And in particular, he has worked with the U.S. State Department and the Department of Justice Rule of Law Initiative to speak to judges and prosecutors and other legal reformists in all parts of the world, but specifically in Eastern Europe, in various countries there, including specifically Macedonia, where he has spent a great deal of time. So we thank Judge Stearns for being here today. To his right is Tom Peebles. Mr. Peebles is the regional director for within the Justice Department for what's called the Office of Overseas Prosecutorial Development, Assistance, and Training. And that is a mouthful, but the acronym is OPDAT. And what OPDAT does, and Mr. Peebles can explain it in more detail, is that they are tasked with going to countries around the world that have developing legal systems and helps them with exactly what we're here to talk about, reforming their judicial system, their legal system, to make it more efficient and more accountable and more transparent. And Mr. Peebles is the regional director for Central and Eastern Europe, overseeing individuals who are on the ground in Skopje working on the issues we're talking about here. They're working on it on the ground there every day. Tom has worked in that role since 1996, and in July of 2010, he began serving for the second time in his capacity now as regional director. To his right is Marcus Busch, and Mr. Busch is a trial attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice within the Office of International Affairs, and their acronym is OIA. And what OIA does is they are working on the operational side of these transnational issues. His office will correspond with counterparts in other parts of the world, in countries such as Macedonia, to work on issues of extradition, on cooperation in terms of getting documents, witnesses, and individuals who perhaps have been indicted but are residing or perhaps hiding in other countries. His office works with countries to get the cooperation needed to bring those individuals here, and vice versa. If someone, for example, is charged with crimes in Macedonia and he or she is residing in the United States, his Office of International Affairs will assist with the cooperation of getting that person extradited to Macedonia. And Mr. Busch is assigned to a region of the world that includes Macedonia, and so he is knowledgeable about that. To his right is Thea Trumbic, who is with the World Bank. She is she's a private sector development specialist, and she is on a project. She's a member of what's called the Doing Business Project of the World Bank, which in particular with respect to Macedonia is working with trying to make the business regulatory environment there more conducive to businesses, to investors from around the world. And Ms. Trumbic has had experience with sort of the legal obstacles that are in place that perhaps prevent a more conducive and cooperative business environment from being present. And so she has worked with the Macedonian government and the Macedonian legal system to try to alleviate those obstacles to help get the environment better for businesses and for the economic situation to grow.
I've spent almost a dozen years now, mostly with the Department of Defense and then lately with the Department of Justice and the Department of State, working on rule of law issues in the Balkans, to some degree Central Asia. In Macedonia, I've had the privilege of working for the last 3 years through the auspices of the Supreme Court of Macedonia, the embassy, our embassy there, and the Department of Justice on some of the reform issues that have made their way into the new Code of Criminal Procedure. Rather than engage in pleasantries now, one thing that I have discovered from my time in Macedonia is with Macedonia is you can speak very frankly. And when I come back to an appreciation of where I think reform is in the country, I am going to speak frankly, not critically, but very frankly, and I'll give you as honest an assessment as I can of where I think the whole issue of judicial independence rests today.
Do I need to properly do that? Careful with the ice. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As Steve indicated, my name is Tom Peebles. I'm a career attorney with the U.S. Department of Justice, and since late '96, early '97, I've worked with this office that Steve mentioned, the overseas Prosecutorial Development Assistance and Training, or OPDAT, which provides developmental assistance to partners around the world.
My name is Marcus Busch. I, along with Steve, was formerly an assistant United States attorney in Dallas, Texas, prosecuting major fraud cases and public corruption cases. Now I am assigned to the Office of International Affairs within the Department of Justice, and I deal on a daily basis with Macedonia, with Montenegro, with Serbia, Croatia, Bosnia, Germany, Belgium, a few other countries too, in assisting law enforcement and prosecutors in obtaining individuals who are fugitives, obtaining evidence that's important to cases in the United States and cases in Macedonia and other countries. That's what I do on a daily basis. I'm on the operational side, so I'm not particularly involved in the reform of law in any country, but on occasion we are asked for our opinion on proposed changes to criminal codes and procedures, and obviously we engage in treaty negotiations with the State Department. The treaty that we have with Macedonia dates back to 1901, and so it's a little outdated. If we have a case involving piracy, things of that matter, then the treaty's perfect. But for a lot of the new crimes, obviously cybercrime, child pornography, money laundering, transnational crimes, which is a serious concern, not only in the Balkans, but throughout the rest of the world, the United States. The treaty is obviously outdated, and at some point the United States State Department and Department of Justice will, I would imagine, engage in negotiations for a new treaty.
Good afternoon, my name is Trumbic, and I'm actually from, can you hear me? Okay. I come from the region. I'm half Serbian, half Croatian, so Macedonia is very close to my heart. I like the country and the language and the food and everything. And I have, in the last 5 years, worked in a business project. I have some brochures here if you haven't heard of our project. What we do is we look at 10 different areas that are important to business. And I must also say I'm not a lawyer, I'm an economist, so my perspective will be a little bit different. And the things that I've experienced with them more on the implementation side and sort of the research side, the evaluation of some of the reforms that have taken place in the last few years in Macedonia. And in our report, which looks at, as I said, business regulation, Macedonia has done quite well. And we come out, in the last report, there were 38 of 183 countries, covering all 10 areas. But in certain areas, there's still a lot of room to improve, and one of them is the efficiency of the court system for getting cases through, and that's something. But it's a great privilege to be here today and with such a distinguished panelists, so we look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Well, let me start out by asking the panel, and let's start with Judge Stearns, to help us identify what is it, what are the central challenges that are faced in the Macedonian judicial system and legal system. Let's start out by identifying those problems, and then we can get into how perhaps we can solve them.
I came in this morning to hear, unfortunately, just the last half hour of the very interesting panel that preceded ours. And there the emphasis is on the importance of judicial independence to investment. And investment is a driver, I think, of the reform effort that is being made in Macedonia now with the judicial system as a whole, but it's not the real driver. The real driver is European Union accession. The European Commission has been extremely critical of Macedonia as early as as late as this morning, as I understand from the newspapers, over the slow pace of meeting the standards of the key communautaire that Macedonia will have to comply with if it's moved from candidate status to full EU membership. What the European Commission is looking for in Macedonia, that is the model that the European Commission has put out for Macedonia to achieve, is this one: an independent judiciary functioning in a constitutional system of government in which the powers of each branch are performed without interference by the others. Secondly, a trained judiciary with a high technical competence, given adequate resources to carry out its work. Third, judges who act as neutral arbiters in an adversarial system that respects the European ideal of equality of arms. Europeans use the phrase equality of arms to use what we would mean by adversarial systems of trial. That is, where each party is represented and has equal access to resources. The judge sits and acts, again, as the umpire, as between the two, rather than as a participant in the case.
As I look at Macedonia, I see many of the problems that Judge Stearns just enumerated. I also have the perspective of looking at Macedonia in relationship to its neighbors, where we, the Department of Justice, also has bilateral assistance programs, working directly with the governments, with prosecutors, sometimes with judges, police, in each of the countries, many of the countries of the former Yugoslavia, including Macedonia. And all these countries are struggling with what we call the rule of law. It seems to be, as the countries of Southeast Europe make this transition, long, difficult, sometimes a generational transition from authoritarian government to democracy, the rule of law component seems to be the most difficult, and all kinds of theories of why that should be the case, but much of it is really, as technical as it might sound, about changing attitudes among justice sector actors, the judges, prosecutors, police, prison officials, but also changing attitudes among the public, where the public expects, has very different set of expectations in a democracy of its justice sector than people living less fortunate and living under authoritarian systems. And it's a change in attitude that's very, very important. For the Department of Justice and for our programs in Southeast Europe, I would say that they all, in one way or another, seem to come back to getting a better handle on organized crime and corruption. Our central mission, if you like, is to, in Macedonia, throughout the region, helping our partners do a better job of investigating, prosecuting, and adjudicating organized crime and corruption cases. And in the Balkans, these are organized crime and corruption. They're used as sort of almost two sides of the same coin. They don't have to be, and probably in our country you can separate them out, but in Macedonia, throughout Southeast Europe, organized crime and corruption go together. Much of the organized crime developed in those heady but difficult years of the early 90s, when previously public enterprises were privatized, and still living with that legacy. One thing that makes working on the criminal justice side easier in some ways than working with judges and with adjudicative techniques is that you can be very result-oriented. And what we're very, very interested in the Department of Justice is seeing more cases that go through the system involving organized crime and public corruption. More convictions, more real time spent in prison by wrongdoers. There's been some progress here in Macedonia. There have been some cases that have gone all the way through the process. The appeals process is a little different, as Judge Stearns indicated, but Macedonia, in that sense, is about at least at the same level as its neighbors.